Today, we sit down with Faiz Shakir. Faiz has thrown his hat into the ring to be the DNC, Democratic National Chair. We'll find out today if that's a better bad idea. Faiz was also the campaign manager for the presidential campaign of Bernie Sanders in 2020. By the way, we love Bernie Sanders. And he's also the founder of More Perfect Union, focusing on labor issues and what affects working people. So let's get into it. I'm Sean O'Brien, General President of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters.
Put your helmets on, buckle your chin straps. It's a full contact sport.
We're going to find out who has a better bad idea. Well, we're here with Faiz Shakir. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you, President O'Brien. It's an honor to be with you.
Yeah, your work has been tireless on behalf of the Democratic Party. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I've been a kid growing up in Florida and Pakistani immigrant parents, and worked at a dry cleaner. They were small business entrepreneurs, started small dry cleaners all over the state of Florida. And so it's my first jobs in life. And then I was the first kid out of my high school to go to Harvard. I was fortunate to do it. I played baseball. Growing up, I was immigrant parents. They didn't know anything about baseball.
Right.
Like I'd teach them the game, to be honest with you. And I happened to be okay at it. And I got an opportunity to go play in college. And from there, I've been fighting a working class fight, I'd like to think, for the better part of 20 years.
So parents from Pakistan immigrated over. How old were they?
They were right out of college. So probably were in their late 20s, mid-20s.
So they came over here to live the American dream.
That's right. Yeah.
And they bought a small business.
Yeah. My dad was a computer scientist. He graduates from Pakistan at the top of his class. He goes to Oxford. So out of Oxford, he's a computer scientist. He comes over to the United States working for defense contracting companies in the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah.
What made him go into his own business?
At some point he told me, he's like, as America's this great land of opportunity, and what it allows you to do, he comes from a place where you didn't have these kinds of opportunities. You can get your own capital and you can start your own business. You can be whatever you want to be. And he had an entrepreneurial spirit, which I wish I had a little bit more of. He's like, I'm going to go start something. He learns all about dry cleaning. I'm like, I don't know how the hell he found dry cleaning.
Well, your clothes are pressed pretty well. Did you do that at home?
You did teach me, Sean, dress for success. It was a big thing.
So you know how I learned how to iron real well? And I get compliments on it right now. No. When I was like 11 years old, I went to Catholic school.
All right.
And my mother used to iron our clothes every day. So she gives me the shirt. She says, hey, I just ironed your shirt. And I looked. I said, you did? She goes, well, if you think you can do a better job, guess what?
You do it.
So guess what? From there on in,
you do it yourself?
I was ironing my shirt.
I went to Catholic schools too.
I should have kept my mouth shut.
You had to wear a uniform, right?
Oh, yeah, it was awful. We had brown pants.
Same.
Yellow shirt with some awful brown and white like patent tie. And I wore a clip-on probably till about 3 years ago.
So I had no tie, but I had the yellow or white shirt with the brown slacks. Yeah. Catholic school.
Awful. So your mom worked in the business as well?
Yes, they were a team, and to obviously raise a family as well. Me and my brother, 6 years younger than me. He's a doctor. He's the good one.
How old were you when you started working at the shop?
Oh, man. 12.
So you violated every child labor law there was.
I was taught from a young age to value labor.
That's good. So tell us what it's like growing up, because you're a staunch supporter of the Democratic Party. You've advocated very hard on behalf of working people, especially unionized workforce, and you're coming from a red state. What actually, made you, fall, I guess, in love with, representing working people, representing hardworking people? Is it because of the experience you witnessed with your parents, or
I think
what was it?
Certainly, if politics was a utopia, Sean, I wouldn't be in this arena. Mm-hmm. I think it's the injustices about it that drive me. And there's been no shortage of injustices, but the first one that catalyzed me was after 9/11. And a Muslim kid growing up and coming out of college, feeling a march to the Iraq War that just upset me greatly, and I felt a minority in my own country around. You remember that period of time. If you were opposed to the Iraq War, you were nutty. And I felt that way, and it moved me into politics. I felt like, yes, if you want to change, just suit up and be part of it. And so at the age of 22, I graduated from college. I get involved. I work for a guy named Senator Bob Graham from Florida. He was a Senate Intelligence Committee chairman at the time. He opposed the Iraq War. He said, blood will be on your hands if you guys support this. Mm-hmm. And I was like, whoever that guy is, I'm with him. And it was actually the first time I ever heard of a guy named Bernie Sanders, who I later learned went to work for. And, both of them being loud and proud opponents of the war. And so that was the first entree in. And then over a period of time, you learn one injustice after another. Sean.
So what was your political views when you actually got recruited to play baseball at Harvard University?
Yeah.
Right. You go to Harvard University in Cambridge, Mass, which is a very, very liberal, progressive city. And I believe Harvard was very liberal and progressive back then. Did that have any influence on your political views?
Oh, definitely. We're coming from there. As you said, I come from a red area. In fact, the area in Brevard County where I came from in Florida was the most highest performing for Ronald Reagan. And, he came and visited our airport. That's one of my first political memories of Ronald Reagan coming down, visiting our little town. And then after that, I go to Harvard and I learn about a different political dimension that I had never been exposed to. They host, freshman members of Congress. They got an Institute of Politics out there. And I'm getting an awakening of, oh man, I could see a career. I could get involved in politics. I didn't even know that was an option, particularly for young immigrants, kids. That's not a thing. It's doctors or lawyers or engineers or something else.
Right.
Like, wait, that's an arena you could work in. And I also just figuring out how the hell this whole business works, which we're still figuring out to this day. But I was like, there's something about this drives me, because originally I like to think of most people when they get involved in politics for the first time, you're saying, I have an ambition and a vision of doing something different, changing this country for the better. And that's the avenue, right? If you hopefully hold to those ambitions, that's what draws you into politics, to work there. And I think some people lose their way, quite frankly, get involved in money and corruption.
Who were some of your earlier influences at Harvard University that kind of steered you in this direction of politics? Was there anybody that stands out?
Nobody stands out. I feel like roommates did that more for me. They dragged me to these events. First job I ever got, Sean, was the drug czar came to our event, and he delivered a speech as General Barry McCaffrey at the time.
Okay.
And he comes and delivers a speech, and I go up to the
You got to be careful, though. When you say drug czar and you go to school in Boston, that could have a total different meaning. You understand that, right?
Who the other drug czars?
Oh, you know what they are.
Okay. So I was a guy who never did any drugs. I don't know much about this space.
I never did either, because I probably would have loved him.
Okay. Right. I remember my first recruiting trip to Harvard. There was a guy who I'm sitting there in the room. This guy's got a razor blade on. He's moving powder on a desk, and he sniffs.
This is a student?
Yeah. And this is my first trip, and I was like, what was that? And I'm thinking, I came to Harvard on a recruiting trip wearing a suit and tie, just like this, and I'm looking around and I'm like, what was that? And to this day, I didn't know. I think it was cocaine, but I was like, that was my first experience of being at Harvard. So I was like, this is what goes on here. Interesting. I didn't think that was.
I'm going to do real well here.
Like, I didn't realize that was going happening. But so then, Barry McCaffrey, former drug czar, gives a speech. I go up to the microphone, I ask a question. He goes, hey, it's an interesting question. It was about doping in sports. And I had some stats and facts. Pretty young kid.
Well, that was kind of around the Baldor era, right?
Totally. It was their onset of the steroid era.
The Jose
1998,
Canseco
totally.
And,
exactly.
Those guys come in the Major League Baseball at 185 pounds. They look like bodybuilders.
Yes, Griffey.
Mark McGuire.
Everybody's huge. Yeah, everyone's huge. And home runs are shooting off the charts. So I asked him about doping in sports, and he says, you want a job? I was like, is he serious? And I go up to him and he gives me a job.
So how many people are in this lecture?
That was like 400, 500 people. Yeah.
So he picked you out of 400 people.
He was like, that's an interesting question. Never been asked that. You want a job? And I was like, great. That was my first road in.
So if you never asked a question and someone else went up to the mic and asked a question, you think they would have hired him right on the spot?
I went up to his aide. I was going to let it go. My roommate's there with me. And he goes, I bet, I said, he probably says that to everybody. He goes, no, I bet he doesn't. Go up and ask his aide. So I go up to the aide and I say, does he? I'm sure he says this to everybody, right? She's like, no, I've never heard him say that. If you want a job, let me know. And I send her email, I get a job. And so I get the job. This is the end of the Clinton administration, 1998.
Okay.
I get the job. I'm walking into the Bush administration, 1990. So we're at 99, 2000. So I come in, he's elected in 2000, right? So early 2001. So I'm now starting this job with a new administration, not the one I bargained for. So I'm working for George W. Bush as he comes into office. And I have a fun one with that. So Karl Rove, I got to meet and know him.
So at this point, you were a registered Democrat.
Yes.
And were you a registered Democrat at the age of 18 or?
This is probably right around that time. Whenever. So probably in college, actually. Probably in college, 20, 21 years old. start becoming a Democrat. And then, so I come here, I get this job, and this is an amazing thing. I'm invited to some meeting with Muslim leaders in the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives in 2001. And the Secret Service comes in and kicks one of our guys out. And I turn around, they said he's a threat, Muslim threat. We all stand up in solidarity and walk out with him. So, we're not going to
So a little profiling going on back then?
I think it's still a little bit, still goes on occasionally. And so I go back to my desk. Here I am, young intern, at the White House. I write a letter to the President of the United States. I sign it, staff member. And I put it I go over to the new executive office building.
So when you said staff member,
yes,
did you put your name?
Yeah, put my name, put staff members, said what office, said my phone number.
You probably should have put future ex-staff member.
I was the gumption, right, of a young kid. Put it in the internal circulation. I didn't think I'd ever hear anything. Next day, I get a call from Karl Rove, senior advisor to the president. Says, Mr. Shakir? I was like, yes. He's like, I'm in receipt of your letter. Tell me what your problem is. And so we had a good conversation. I mean, I appreciated him engaging. I engaged him back, and I said, Mr. Rove, I'd like to just make sure the president deals with the problem. I'm sure this doesn't reflect your values. You care about this community, and let's patch it up. Why don't we have a presidential meeting with the same group that he's like, we'll make it happen. To his credit, it did happen before 9/11, and then 9/11 changed a lot.
Yeah, 9/11 was tough.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
changed a lot.
That changed a lot of
Totally.
a lot of dimensions in this
Exactly.
country. And you made reference earlier about after 9/11 things changed, especially for Muslim people and
like myself,
people not from America that resembled who obviously did the terrorist attacks. But can you tell us some of the experience you had with that?
I mean, I come from a place to this day still very proud of so fortunate
Your heritage,
to
right?
live in this damn country. It's like, what an amazing place to live in. Mm-hmm. And I think of some of my cousins who live abroad, and they don't have anywhere near the opportunities to reach any degree of the same potential in their life. If you're in Pakistan, man, tough, very tough life. And here I am with go to Harvard, play baseball, get involved in politics, advocate for other people, like that. Fortunate. And when during that period of time, when you feel your countrymen around you are like, yeah, but I'm suspicious of you. I don't think you believe in the same things I do. I don't know. I think you might be a terrorist. And for as long as I've been in politics, I remember when first day I ever worked for Nancy Pelosi, there's an article that Pelosi had hired a terrorist to work on her staff. It's dogged me, for ages that this guy might not be one of us. And that's the thing that bothers me the most. I want to convey to you how much I feel very fortunate, lucky to be in this country.
Right. And you look at some of the people that are from this country that, don't have roots or heritage to a potential third world nation, right? Mm. And some of them are the worst people you'll run into that don't value how important America is, don't value how lucky we are. And it's, I always tell people, and I told someone recently complaining about America. And I'm like, what's so bad about it? I said, it's the greatest country in the world. I said, look, if you think about a lot of people that come to this country, their parents immigrate over in the 70s and 80s. You're born in America, right? Imagine taking like my sons who were born in 2001 and 2004, dropping them off in a third world nation. So you got 3 tasks. You've, number 1, got to learn the language. You've got to find a job and buy a home. I can tell you right now, they're going to fail miserably, right? So
the hustle, I mean, I saw it with my parents, the hustle determination to make both a life for yourself and a better life for your kids.
Right.
All that drives them. And, I often say of many of us who register, I think, constructive criticism of the United States of America and the policy direction of it is that I named an organization called More Perfect Union. Where does that come from? Right. We the people, in order to create a more perfect union, it's embedded in our founding philosophy that the nation isn't perfect. We're struggling to make it better. And it does bother me, whether you're left or right, that criticism has to come from a place of, we see the value, it's good, and it could be even better.
Yeah, there's a fine line between criticism and just straight out cynicism.
Totally.
And the criticism's great. I think everybody embraces criticism. I know in our line of work, our day job, I always end a speech with a town hall. And my phrase is, please, I want to hear your thoughts, your opinions, but more importantly, your criticisms.
Right.
And criticisms will never get taken personal as long as they're in the best interest, in your case, in the country, in my case, my organization. Right. And I think people now can't decide whether they want to be critical for the right reasons or cynical for just to be cynical for the wrong reasons.
Well, there's a lack of faith in institutions. And
Right.
like you're running an organization. I'm trying to run one, run for one. And I'm like, people have lost faith that institute and government can work for you. And that's, it bothers me that yes, you can have cynicism about the corruption of some of these, whether the leaders of them are operating with integrity, but never lose sight of the fact that these institutions are what you absolutely effing need. Because without it, you ain't taking on Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg alone. I promise you that. You're going to need structures that fight for people. And they're going to have to be led by people with integrity who give a damn about other people, who want to be in service of people beyond themselves. Otherwise, we don't stand a shot.
Well, it's not a self-serving mission.
Yes.
And that's what people have to realize. it's not about I, it's about, they, the
getting
cause.
people consensus is always messy. You know better than anybody. Democracy is messy. Just own it. Like, hey, so many people are going to be let down. That's fine. But know that the ambition of what we're trying to do is fight for people beyond ourselves.
I mean, in our organization, no one ever criticizes and everybody embraces everything we do. But that's the beauty of being in a union. That's the beauty of having a voice and being democratic is that you can say it and do whatever you want without, fear of any retribution or retaliation. And I think this past election, and we'll get into that a little bit later, was a clear demonstration of why we need, reform and reboot the Democratic Party. But if we could go back, so in 2016, you were advising Bernie Sanders in the election. Yeah. You took a lot of criticism from Hillary Clinton's folks, and we're still on the same team at that point in time, right? So, what was that experience like? Because look, you basically dedicated your life to public service. You've basically dedicated your life to the Democratic Party. You're embracing what you believe or who you believe in, and you're trying to do the right thing. And even though there's competing interests, at the end of the day, we're on the same team, right?
Yeah, you're referencing a period of time. The WikiLeaks comes out at the end of that campaign and documents some emails in which I was getting shit talked by some people, including, John Podesta, who I admire greatly, but he was the chair of the Hillary Clinton campaign. He married me and my wife. I had met my wife working under John at the Center for American Progress. So, but he knows I ideologically am in a different place than he is. So as a courtesy, earlier that year, I gave him a heads up, like, listen, I'm in a different place. I'm liking Bernie Sanders. I like the direction of this country that he's fighting for. I'm not really sold on the direction that Hillary Clinton is offering. And I tell it to him candidly. I learned later, of course, there's a lot of people angry and upset. He tells me directly, he calls me directly and says, this is awful and this is terrible. And it's fine, right? You have a candid back and forth. I'm going to keep doing what I'm going to do.
I've got the same calls this past year.
Yes, right. You know a little bit of what I'm talking about. Everything you're going to do is destroy this country. And I'm like, okay, I understand, but I'm making this out of conviction. This is how I feel, and I respect that you disagree with it. I'm going to do this. And then later, so that happens at the real time, sometime earlier in the election cycle. Then later in the election cycle, WikiLeaks makes it all public for everybody to know that there was this whole, essentially anger at me for daring to not go with the flow. And to this day, that was the first time Bernie Sanders called me, actually, when he read about
So you're reading
that.
these emails.
Yes.
So you're being told one narrative, hey, people aren't happy with you.
Yes.
It's a big problem. But when you saw these emails, what were you thinking?
It's petty. Just petty nonsense. Like, you guys, you're running the Hillary Clinton campaign. You just feel good about what you're doing. Like, who the hell cares if I'm one dude is going to go help Bernie Sanders? It's not a big deal. Just let it ride. But the desire to make it feel personal just felt unnecessary.
Yeah, that's the worst part about any of these situations. And I've learned over the years being in the Teamsters for 34 years. The one thing that's great is you can say and do whatever you want in the best interest of the organization. The tough pills to swallow when the personal attacks come. Right. And they're not good for any campaign or anything else. But so getting back to, you read these emails. Now, the people you thought were your friends, even though they're on the other side, I mean, they had to hurt a little bit, right?
A couple. It depends who you're talking about. There were a couple of people who I
expected it
who
from.
I expected it from, and I was like, fine, like feelings mutual. But the others, what would I say about it, Sean? Is it happened in real time? It was candid. We were back.
The
and
best
forth
part about
in real
emails
time.
is people don't realize the E in email stands for evidence.
Stays there.
It's evidence, right?
Yes.
And it's funny, even when people get caught, because it happens in our world.
Yeah.
I never said that. I didn't say that. And then you pull up an email and say, what does this say here? Yeah. Well, you're reading it wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm reading it wrong. You call me an asshole. I don't think there's any different interpretation than
I'll
that.
say this about Podesta, though. You had all of his emails leaked. And
I'm glad you said his name, not me.
Yeah, John. No, John. I still have I still have a great deal of respect for him. And he knows me, I know him, and we respect each other. But when when you have all your emails, like, can you imagine, Sean? You and I just all of our emails out in the world, and when they all did get released, I think you found that he was like generally a straight shooter. Like the fact that you'd have all that stuff out there about one person and be like, oh, generally John was saying things to people that he was saying to them privately, and then we learned about it publicly. Straight shooter, And to me, that's
you can gain some respect from
totally,
that. Yeah.
Totally. There is one thing if the emails come out and you're like, oh, wait, he said a different thing. He called me and said a different thing.
Right.
And then privately he was bullshitting. No, everything was straight. So, that is that.
So fast forward, that campaign ends, and in 2000, what do you do between 2016 and 2020?
First, for 2 years, I run I'm the first ACLU national political director.
And for people that are watching or listening, what is the ACLU and what is their mission?
American Civil Liberties Union, right? It has 50 state affiliates all over this country. Generally a legal organization, fights for civil rights and civil liberties, and defends your constitutional rights to free speech, rights of assembly, rights to practice whatever faith you choose, all kinds of things. And I was a big believer in that moment, first couple of years of Donald Trump's first administration, that we were going to have to not only be a legal organization, but a people-oriented.
And by the way, you also have a law degree from Georgetown, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And I wanted to be a people-powered organization. That at this moment, if people were suffering from a Muslim ban or a family separation or whatever the case may be, some civil liberty infringement, that we had to be of community and part of that. Not just we're going to take you to court, which we were doing, but also we're going to be in solidarity with you in your fight to gain recognition and build community around you so you don't feel alone in those moments. And we built a pretty strong, in that moment, ACLU looked and felt different. It was a large, kind of powerful organization.
Grassroots organization. You're in the communities.
Exactly.
Finding out what the trials and tribulations are.
Yeah.
And then obviously if they're not consistent with what's in the Constitution, or you believe that constitutional rights have been violated, then you litigate it.
Yep. And to our credit, also found ways to work in common ground with the Trump administration when we did criminal justice reform, for instance, in that first administration, work with Jared Kushner and his team. And, where there's commonality, do it. Where there's differences, you fight it out in a democracy.
So you worked for the ACLU, right? You do, and that's during the Trump administration.
First 2 years.
First 2 years, right? And then what's your next career path?
Well, then what happens next. So then Bernie Sanders announces for president of the United States, and I joined him as his campaign manager for his 2019-2020 run.
And you were the first Muslim campaign manager in the history of any candidate in this country.
It's I proudly own the title of it, but it's funny that, and I think Senator Sanders feels the same way about it. It's like, Faiz, I didn't hire you because you're Muslim. I hired you because you're damn good at the job you do. And I think it was the first call he ever
100%.
made to me. And I was like, that's the way I'd like to be understood. But I'll own the title, especially on behalf of young Muslim kids all over the country.
And your parents are still alive today, right?
Exactly. So it means something to be the first, right?
100%. What are they, so through your education, which I'm sure they're beyond proud, you go to Harvard and then Georgetown Law, and then you have all these, these pretty high profile, probably not as well paying as you'd want them to be, but high profile, influential jobs.
Right.
What is your parents thinking this whole time?
I should have been a doctor. Still, I think to this day, my dad still, I think harbors the feeling like you would have been better off with like more wealth.
Well, you kind of now you are kind of like a surgeon when you think about it, because you got to navigate and have, some really precise cuts and movements, or else it could be catastrophic, right?
Yes. I'm happy. I feel honored and lucky that I got to where I am, and the opportunity to, do something on behalf of other people, you do. You've lived this. It feels good, right? To be able to say your life could have greater impact than just me alone. Other people may benefit.
What's your connection to the labor movement?
Where does it begin? I mean, if you think about the awakening of this, it's got to be some version of knowing and feeling. Probably in that same era of the Iraq War, we were also passing gigantic tax cuts for billionaires. At that time, we were talking about 100 millionaires. It wasn't even billionaires language. Now we've got billionaires. And knowing and feeling like, man, who runs this shop? You worry, like, where's the people who think differently? And when you looked at that time, and it's still the case now, and you looked at, okay, who's fighting the tax cuts? It's labor. It was labor who was giving you a sense of a different universe in which regular working people would be the first thought, not the last thought. And that was my first awakening of it, learning about who labor was, because they're the voices.
So you come from a red state, Florida.
Yeah. Not many unions.
Not many unions. No. So it's not like you grew up with it.
No.
Your adult life, you start working and you see the disparity in pay, right? Number one, and what these CEOs are making and everything else. And then you find out who the actual victims of the success of these CEOs are. And those are the workers, those are unionized employees.
That and who's been organizing to be an alternative voice of what we should do in this nation. So you're saying
bankruptcy reform.
Yeah, right, exactly. So you have bankruptcy reform, but you also just have generally like how to grow a union movement, workplace democracy, which is just generally an important concept that I'm starting to learn about. Oh yeah, well imagine if on a work site, workers had a chance to tell you, like, we're going to form together and say a wage should be a little bit better. Paid time off should be this, healthcare benefits should be better. That concept just sat with me so strongly from the moment that I got my awakening of it, that, oh man, that makes a lot of sense. That in this country, we're never going to battle with these guys who own politics. At that time, certainly clear, they owned politics. It was very clear. You look at the Senate Majority Leader, the House Speaker at that time under Bush, they were and it was pure corporate favoritism.
Yeah, and a complete anti-union environment.
Complete anti-union.
But you roll
hostility to unions.
Right, but you roll back to 2008, 2009.
Yes.
We had a Democratic president.
Yes.
We had a Democratic Senate.
Yes.
We had a Democratic House. And Labor's biggest goal and objective was the Employee Free Choice Act.
Yep, EFCA. Yep.
And we couldn't get that done.
No, it came, it reminds me a lot of...
And it was because of big business.
Yes. Minimum wage later on. I mean, there's so many things that you're just like, man, why can't we get done? We couldn't get the Democratic threshold to, at that time, we had 60 votes. If I remember correctly, in the Senate, you had 60 votes.
We did,
and
yes.
Still couldn't get there with those votes. And as you're saying, it's because big money had influenced of both parties was, no, this is a bad idea.
So you go to work for Bernie.
Yeah.
Okay, what's a day in the life of working? What was your first day like working for Bernie?
Bernie's a serious guy. He just, it's business. Like from the first call you get in the morning, he's like, all right, so here's what I'm thinking. And
that's an unbelievable impression.
Thank you. It's, it's in my head. It'll always be there. It's in my heart and soul. I love him and I know him, and I could almost, in some sense, I could give you a little talk. And Sean, in a time of massive wealth and income inequality, with 3 people, 1, 2, 3, making more money, we could go through the whole thing. I got it in my head. I could write a fair amount of the speech. But he's a very serious person when he's down to business. So from the moment he's okay, tell me, here's how we're going to set the budget. Where we're going to hire first. What kind of needs do we need on the ground? What are the first states we got to go to? It was. I remember it's funny, the first question he ever asked me. So if you dial it back to 2015, I never really kind of engaged with him. He hears that I'm one of the few Democratic staffers in leadership that likes him. So he's like, I got to talk to this guy. I worked for Harry Reid at the time. He calls me. He says, Faiz, what are we doing wrong?
By the way, Harry Reid and Bernie Sanders, completely different people, right?
Completely different people, but working class oriented people.
Sure.
Harry Reid came from this place of searchlight, benefited from Social Security his own life.
Nevada and Vermont can't be.
Oh yeah, special places.
They're 2 different worlds.
Especially the modern day Nevada for sure. But so he says, what am I doing wrong in this campaign? That's the first question Bernie Sanders asks. It's just straight to the point. Like, no, how you doing? Let me get to know you. Just what were you doing wrong? And I give him an answer. He's like, so flash forward.
This is day one.
That was day one of the prior campaign, his 2015, 2016 campaign.
Okay.
Now we go to 2019, 20, sits me down and says, Faiz, do you think I have any chance of winning this campaign? First question. And so I give him my honest answer, and I say it's about 33% chance, as good as or better than most of the other candidates, but that's a 2/3 chance you lose. And we just walk it through. And he's like, very good. I mean, he just shoots straight from the jump. It's just substance. So we've had a very good, candid back and forth, and I've loved him.
I mean, the guy's a tireless worker. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I've had the fortune to travel and do some rallies nationwide with him early on. I think it was 2002, 2023.
Yeah.
And he's a workhorse.
Totally.
But, I think even now, I met with him probably a year before the actual election.
Yeah.
And, our concerns have always been, what do our members want? What do our members think? And that's who we work for. So, that's the opinion that really matters to us at the end of the day. And I remember sitting in his office, and he called me up, and he's like, we got a tough road ahead of us. Now, this is probably November of 23, right? And he says, I'm very critical, but I know what I'm talking about, and we've got to make some changes if we're going to win this election.
Yeah.
And he was saying it early on, and we were saying it early on. Now, your experience with running his campaign and seeing all the, the gains, where we could make gains, and the shortfalls, was Senator Sanders accurate in November of 2023? Well,
obviously, and you know the answer as well as I do. I mean, he the thing is, why we love him is because he's a conviction-oriented politician. He gives a damn. I mean, he really, truly, he's not corruptible by the standards. And maybe because it's also helpful that he comes from Vermont, small state, 100% grassroots funded campaigns in both 15, 16, and 19, 20. These are landmarks, right? 100% grassroots funded. So he's never sitting in a closed door, fancy room trying to hustle money from any rich person. And in that way, he has kept his spirit and his convictions around exactly the things that the country needs. So when you sit down with him, I've always found he's a populist by nature. He almost like he grows tentacles, understanding and feeling the pain and suffering of people out there in the world. And you put him in a crowd and you say, "Hey, Senator, he's going to go deliver an address." He comes out of that crowd and I say, "How'd you? I thought that speech was great." He's like, "There's a lot of the people are upset. They're suffering out there." And I was like, "How do you know that?" Because when you deliver thousands and thousands of speeches, and you're a populist by nature, you want to hear and feel the feedback. You start to you
can recognize it. I mean, especially if you've been around as long as he has, and he's seen the complete shift, right? Not for the better in the Democratic Party, especially. Totally. There's no better example of what happened in November of this past year.
When he believes in grassrootsism, right? He believes that you have to be closer to the people for whom you fight. And when he senses when our leaders, whether Biden or Harris or whomever, isn't close to that, right? That if you're not feeling it, and it has generally been Bernie Sanders' role to say, "Hey, don't forget. Here's all these people out there who are suffering. Here's the things they're dealing with. Don't get all wrapped up around your politics of what you think in your little club and world that you think is going on." And he's generally been more right than wrong.
Well, it's an interesting point you just made, is that, he's out there. He's got his hand on the pulse of the constituency that he represents. He knows where people are hurting, where they're not hurting, because he's out there. He's in the trenches.
He's trying, right? That's the point. He is forcing himself
he's listening. I think he's listening.
Forcing himself into the reasons why you were out there with him and doing these events. He's compelling himself. I want to get out there and I want to hear these people, this particular set of actors, working class people making under $100,000 a year, don't have a college degree. These are the folks who need champions. I want to know what they're feeling. And you're right that's why he's saying, I don't know that they're with us in November 2023. I think that there's some concerns here. We got to step up our game and give them a vision of what the hell we're doing and why we.
Well, the one thing we pride ourselves on in leadership in this union is making sure that we have our hand on the pulse, or our hand on the pulse of what our members want and needs. And every state, every area is different, right? Because of the geography. And the one thing that the Democrats, and we've been saying it since December or January of 2023 into 24, is that, the Democrats have lost sight of who they represent. And again, we're both Democrats, and coming from Massachusetts, it's a, highly populated Democrat state. And it just seems like, somewhere along the line, there was a total disconnect from the people, the working people that they represented. And I think it was indicative of the results in this election.
And the desire, in my mind, to be more cozy with big capital and corporate power. And my frustration when we do, I think there are things that you and I know we can hang our hat on over the past 4 years that have been helpful to labor. There's been great things out of National Labor Relations Board. There's been, more construction and investments in communities, building up some jobs. There's been a whole host of things that I think we'd be happy with. But then you look at the political apparatus and you say, does the Democratic National Committee, does the Democratic Party stick its necks out and fight corporate power in the ways that we're supposed to? When the president goes to a picket line, it makes history, right? First president go to a picket line. And you say, does the Democratic Party stand with him? Does it mobilize in that moment to tell you this is our brand, this is our values? No, it doesn't. It really felt like that's a one-off thing that he does. When you're fighting, big pharma, or you're taking on, major corporate actors are doing union busting all across this country, you know that there might be a person in an agency toiling and fighting that fight, but the political apparatus is supposed to tell you about that. That's an orientation of our values, right? I'm going to tell you, Amazon is fighting Lena Khan right now, right? Lena Khan is taking Amazon to court, and our job as a political party.
By the way, she did a great job.
Of course, she was she's transformative. I mean, she wouldn't have had the job if not for Joe Biden. She comes in, she files lawsuits against Amazon and Kroger Albertsons mergers and all kinds of things to fight non-compete bans, junk fee fights, all kinds of things. And yet my frustration is you got these champions just taking on corporate power. There's Consumer Financial Protection Bureaus, Securities and Exchange Commission. There's some real important things going on. And the political apparatus, man, no desire to stick it neck, almost a sense of a reflex back against it. Like, oh, well, you're Lena Khan's taking on Amazon? Man, we probably can't say anything about that.
Yeah, you can't say anything about that. But, to your point, they want to highlight the one time a president walked a picket line.
Yeah.
And at the same time, in the Teamsters Union, we had over 190 pickets.
Totally.
Since we took over in March 22nd of 2022. And when you're reaching out to the administration, not just in Washington, D.C., but you're reaching out to delegations, Democratic delegations all over this country, wherever we're striking, wherever we're picketing, and no one's showing up. And then all of a sudden, Joe Biden shows up on one picking line, right, for a photo op.
Yeah.
And to your point, we've got people in the administration battling corporate America.
Yeah.
We've got people in the administration, trying to dismantle an attempt at monopolizing industries. And we don't hear a thing about that, right? But we hear about, and our members looking to say, well, look, I've been on strike for 235 days. We're on strike 100 different places in that year, and we don't see anybody.
But I'll tell you one story about this, President Biden. You'll remember it during the campaign, Harris's campaign. At the end, I said you knew some of your Teamsters were on strike, Marathon oil workers in Detroit. Right. And I remember we going on a trip with Senator Sanders, and I said, Senator, there's some Teamsters out here striking. They can't get a lot of recognition. We had covered them, More Perfect Union, given them some attention. And he said, I want to be there for them. Just like within, it was a 5-second conversation, President Biden. He was like, yeah, I want to go there. I want to ask them if they would like me there. Of course, right. Kevin and the team, yeah, come. Then we tried for weeks, would Kamala Harris like to go? You know how that went?
Well, she didn't go.
She didn't go. And it's frustrating to me. Boeing workers were out on strike probably for 1/3 of that entire campaign. I tend to think, I don't know how you feel about this. We're held to a higher standard in the Democratic Party because we are understood because of our historical lineage and what we are, the fighter for a common person. And when we don't meet that standard, we get penalized. People out there say, I'm going to stay home.
Half the battle's showing up.
Yeah. And that's why, maybe a Republican, to your point, like a Republican could go out of color and show, and Trump does this a fair amount where, you wouldn't have expected that he would say, appoint a labor secretary who's fairly pro-labor. So then they can gain some. But what they expect of a Democratic Party is you're going to set the standard. Right. You're going to be my champion when the chips are down, and you're going to stick your necks out on the biggest fights. And when we don't, I think we get penalized.
So Senator Sanders not running for president 2022, 23, 24, 25, right? He's out on a picket line because he cares about those workers and wants them to understand that he's supporting them. You have a presidential candidate, and this is another greedy corporate giant who doesn't respect their workforce. She has an opportunity to go out there and demonstrate, especially in Michigan, because Michigan is a battleground state.
Detroit, yeah.
And she doesn't show up. What are people supposed to think?
Bothered me. It bothered me, because I was making the case privately. I'm doing my part as an advocate. I'm saying it's your job, your chance. You get to decide. And I'm fortunate that I have connections with people there, and I'm saying this would be a great idea for you. Mm-hmm. And they weigh it, they consider it, and they don't do it. Governor Walz, I think they navigated around a Boeing strike there when he was traveling. I'm like, navigate around it, just go to him. What better company, by the way? Boeing, right? Here's doors falling off of airplanes.
It's a nightmare.
Workers going on strike to say, like, I'm going to save this country, this company.
Workers went on strike because, a couple of reasons. They were completely disrespected and underpaid and overworked.
Yes.
And then you have a CEO that hasn't made a profit since he's been a CEO there.
Right.
And you got doors falling off and everything else. And he's giving himself 33% bonuses.
Stock dividends from this company out the wazoo. Like they care about the financialization of it, not the actual technical engineering of an airplane. That's your job, number one. And the workers are saying, I'll remind you of it. That's what we do here. We'd like some support. And what a great opportunity to go tell the people about democratic values.
We've got some battles going on right now. Costco.
Yeah.
We're potentially probably going to strike Costco. And when I say we strike them, Costco's choosing to strike themselves. Yeah. United Airlines.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no greater benefactor from the United States than these airlines, whether it's United, Delta, American. I mean, I think they've done very well.
Costco, like a few $1 billion in net profits?
Costco's
like $7 billion,
like the
maybe?
third largest retailer in the country, correct? And it prides himself as saying, hey, we're very pro-union.
Totally.
They run the most anti-union campaigns going. And, we have 18,000 people under contract with the potential for another 100,000. And if they're so pro-union, why are they not agreeing to neutrality? Yeah. Why aren't they agreeing to card check? And again, it gets down to what we talk about is the corporate greed in America. But we do have Democrats that fall in love with corporate America.
Yeah. And I would argue to you that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is conviction. When you talk about whatever the heck you talk about, do you believe it? When the words are coming out of your mouth, right, as a Democrat, whatever you might be talking about, I want to feel sincerity and authenticity and conviction, whatever positions you might hold.
Well, the words coming out of my mouth are my reputation.
Right.
And that is my conviction.
Right.
I mean, I think everybody...
I'm saying of Democrats, right?
Oh, the Democrats.
I'm saying voters are looking at Democrats saying, I want to see conviction and integrity about the things that you're saying. And I think that's part of the penalization too. It's corporate money. But it's also just give me, because if you take, let's say Trump, right? You flip this around. It's not here's a guy who, comes from wealth, loves his billionaires around him. But there's a sense that, he's going to tell Timmy straight. There's a sense of conviction of this is what I believe. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm a person of action. I'm going to come in and I'm going to shake some stuff up and get some stuff done. Democrats, I remember this poll, a focus group of Democrats, and they asked, what animal would you associate with a Democrat? So first of all, you would know what animal they associate with a Republican. What would it be? A predator of some sort, tiger.
Sure.
Or,
they're relentless.
Sure. And now, what animal did a focus group associate with them?
Maybe a kitten?
Exactly. It was a sloth, right? Slow, soft.
Yeah.
Right? And that thing is what bothers me. There's some conviction.
Well, there's a lot of talk and no action. I mean, we can all like debate Republican, Democrat. But the one thing that's clear is, to your point, a lot of these Democrats, what they say and what they do are two different things.
Yeah, and my view on this is just say what you mean. Like, I don't know how you got yourself, wherever you might be on positions in, like, what are the big things I think hurt Harris's campaign? She had positions in 2019, and then there's change. And I'm like, okay, people change. I change, you change. Like, over time. But you got to own it. Like, tell people, here's what I believe then, and here's why I believe a different thing now. I believe people would respect it. They own it. I mean, how many people have changed their views on LGBT equality issues over 20 years or something? People change their minds.
Immigration.
People change their minds. Family separation.
Look at Hillary Clinton's speech in 2008, I believe it was.
Predators or something?
No, but her speech and her plan regarding immigration is no different than what the Republicans have embraced. So it's like, and then they're attacking the immigration, which is a whole different animal we won't get into. But
I think people just are hungry for the integrity of conviction around it. Whatever your politics might be, just tell it to me straight and own that when you get into a position of authority, you're gonna shake some shit up to get something done.
I think it's just an easy concept, and it's simple block and tackling.
Yeah.
Tell the truth, and if it doesn't work out, then admit your strategy was wrong and pivot and try something else.
Yeah.
It's not really difficult.
Yeah.
So what's difficult is, why would you want to be the head of the DNC?
Well, we got to repair this, brand. There's two major political parties in America.
All right,
you
so
know
just for the audience, what does the DNC actually do?
What does the DNC actually do? So, it is the national fundraising and political vessel to ensure that Democratic candidates who run for office, particularly highest office, the presidency of the United States, have the resources they need and the staffing to win. And so when you're not in the presidency, as it is now, you are helping to form the basis of what will get you back into power. And I view the role differently than a lot of my fellow colleagues do. I say the most important thing is repairing a failing and struggling Democratic brand. That's number one. You gotta tackle that head on and say, we are struggling with working people. And part of the reason we're struggling is we are not associated with being a working class party. When we are at our strongest, when we're associated with being a working class party. But right now, a lot of my good, decent, well-intentioned, competitors in the field feel like the most important jobs are moving budget lines within the organization. You run an organization, you can get sucked into the internal politics and who's on this caucus and who's on that council and who's, this budget line item there. I'm like, yeah. Number one, this Democratic brand has a challenge. We got to project a different thing. So I jumped in the race late and said, hey, I feel with all humility that if you wanted to send a message that the Democratic brand is changing, I'm the best position.
Do your competitors realize that there's a problem in the Democratic Party?
I think that they give pablum and lip service to it. They'll say occasionally, they won't reckon with why we lost or what are the major things that caused us to lose. Instead, it's we got to get closer to working class people.
And why do you think the Democrats lost?
Well, we were talking about some of it, right? The conviction integrity of at the top of saying, what do you honestly believe about some of these things? And then secondly, embracing the friction with corporate America. It's core to, again, we are held to a higher standard. We are supposed to be that champion. When we don't do our job, people stay home. That if one of the major election results was people who would normally vote Democrat stayed home.
But that wasn't what won the election. I mean, ultimately. I mean, I think there's been a letdown that we talked about earlier. People have lost faith in the Democratic Party. And the Republicans are out there, trying to fancy themselves as being the working families party. So they have a lot to prove in this next coming election. But getting back to the DNC and their role, the one thing that is important to us, I think, is to recognize, what's it going to look like under your leadership in 2028 compared to what it has looked like under other leadership? If you were to win the
two major things that come to mind. One is if you're a member of the Democratic National Committee or the Democratic Party, is anything asked of you? No. Online contribution. That's it. Right. Over on the other side, they got a movement, right? That's a movement. You go to any city in America, there are people associated with it who are proud to tell you that they are part of a movement. We need to build a movement. We need to open our doors, let people in. And part of how you build a movement is you say when workers go on strike, we associate ourselves with it. We use our email lists. We organize for them, recruit for them, send them resources if they need it. When they are organizing a new union, we tell people about it, use our media outlets to let people know that this is something major that's going on. This is a reflection of our value. And, all kinds of things. Tenant unions all over this country are doing amazing work to try to fight evictions and undo, rate hikes. I think that there's all kinds of economic justice fights all over this country on the ground. You know them well, canceling medical debt, all kinds of stuff that we associate ourselves with and bring people in. We are of service to others. That's the top line. You are in service of others. When we do that right, we open our doors, we grow the ranks of the Democratic Party such that it is a movement again. It isn't just, a club of elites. And then, I think you change the nature of how we do digital media and direct-to-consumer stuff. You could build your own social media channel so that you're reaching tens of millions of people directly, because we're in an information age where, information is broken for how a lot of people receive it.
So when you say it's a movement that has to be built over time. Now you look at the Republican National Committee. You know, they went into this election with one clear choice, right? Now, is part of the goal of revamping and revitalizing and restructuring the DNC is to get consensus on who the best candidate could be? Or is it still going to be, you know, I want to throw my hat in the ring and it could be 4 or 5 people?
Yeah, ideally, I think you have a competitive democratic process. That's what we love about democracy. Is great competition. Like that's what, like, throw your hat in and fight out. Especially in right now, I think the Democratic Party does not have a clear, you know, national spokesperson leader. As if you're the head of the Democratic Party, you want to provide a space that allows for honest and fair competition between them. You know, one of the criticisms of the DNC back in 2015, 2016, rightly so, was that they put their finger on the scale, right, for Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. Right. That's not what you want. You want, hey, we're neutral, but we want a good competitive environment, which people have to compete for working class votes. That's what I wanted. If I were to set this up right, it's like, yes, I want everybody in. I want a lot of candidates, but I want you pointing and driving your message, your vision as trying to get working class votes, because otherwise we ain't going to do well for the long haul. And I'd love to see that competition play out, right? John Fetterman might have one view, Pete Buttigieg might have one view, you know, Marie Glushenkamp-Perez, AOC. You could go down the list of Democrats, they might have different perspectives, and I'm like, that would be healthy.
I might throw my hat in the ring.
Sean O'Brien,
no
let's do
way.
It. Let's do it, man.
I no way. No
Sign
way.
me up. You need a campaign manager? Let's go.
No, so there was, you know, obviously secondhand information during, you know, this, especially after, you know, President Biden's failed debate. You know, of course, everybody comes out of the woodwork with a criticism of theory, and there's no dispute in the fact he did not do well that night. Yeah. And of course, we're good as Democrats. Everybody's at their best when people are at their worst. And there was some rumors going around that in 2 years, you know, that when Biden ran, he said that he was going to be a transitional president.
Right. Bridge.
Yeah. Right. And so 2 years goes up. Supposedly there was a meeting with some high-ranking cabinet people, some people from the DNC, and you'd probably know this better than I would. And people said, hey, you did some good work. You passed a bunch of bills. And, you know, now it's time to announce that you're not going to run, and it's time to pass the torch, which probably would have been the right thing to do. Yeah. If that had happened, would the Democratic Party been in a better position to win the election?
I hope that Joe Biden himself would feel that way. I mean, he almost left the race in the worst way you possibly could, with 7 days left before the election, and not having had a democratic process by selecting who it would be best positioned to run in that general. So yeah, I hope that even upon his own reflection, we'd all agree this is common sense. You should have, you know, if you knew what you were going to do, you should have backed it out way earlier and allowed us. And I'm sure Senator Sanders hopefully would have thrown in again, and we would have had a more, you know, robust competition over how best to defeat Donald Trump.
Right. So now fast forward, you're going to hopefully win, be the head of the DNC. How are you going to influence some decisions like that moving forward?
Well, first, it's like the orientation of the honesty, integrity of saying, hey, what's the truth and the reality of what we're dealing with here? And so often it feels like you get into some of these closed door rooms and the reality is just obfuscated over. We don't want to confront it. Like, let's just have a real question. Like, you come to whatever point of view you want. Can we just hit this thing head on? What's your honest view? Do you think we'd do better with Joe Biden or not? Do you think we'd do better with Kamala Harris or not? What's the honest answer? And get to like some resolutions of how you feel that are based on asking hard questions. But I also think, to be clear, you know, DNC should just set the platform of a good, open, competitive race. I want to recruit a lot of people to run. Sean O'Brien, interested? My first jobs will be. I'm honest about this. You know, you tease it, but I think there's a hunger in this country for people outside of traditional politics to run for the highest office in the land.
Look at Trump, 2016.
100%. To this day, it's one of his strongest assets. Right. I don't live this politics, and he acts that way too, right? He says, I don't like a lot of these political actors, and treats them accordingly. And I think that on the Democratic side, we have not seen that as frequently, but I think there would be an opening, honestly, of people coming from a labor
I know where you're
movement.
going with this. I'm not interested. All right.
I'm just laying it out.
I hear you.
I'm just laying it out. You make the decision, President O'Brien. But a president title of a different kind might be appealing to you at some point.
Oh, that White House would be a different White House. I can tell you that.
And I'd like to think that there's a number.
It'd be like Animal House.
Raise your hand out there if you're one of the people who'd love to see it.
Oh, it'd be funny. But, you know, I think it's important to recognize that there has to be change if we're gonna,
And you know, I mean,
and let me ask you this question though. So, although you know you might be on a different side than the Republicans, and the DNC and the RNC has always been critical of one another. Is there ever going to be an opportunity where, you know, instead of being critical and there's something that one side may like that the other side has done, would we embrace and support that publicly?
Of course. If you're a person of honesty and conviction, you just say it. Right? I don't understand why people are hesitate. I think sometimes you sense that you may not even know enough about how to answer that question. And part of our job is to figure out what are things he's doing that are okay. And it wouldn't be a hard question for me. Tariffs well executed, President O'Brien. Good idea. Mm-hmm. Right. If you're saying, hey, you're going to shut down your John Deere factory or Case New Holland or Master Lock Company, you're going to move those jobs to Mexico. And if President Trump were to say, hey, if you're going to do that, we'll put a tariff on you in order to preserve jobs in America, good idea.
Great idea.
I'm for it.
Great idea.
And I'm like, what? That's an orientation of a belief system. But you have to start with that. What do you actually want and believe as a compass for this nation? And I think, Democrat who's fighting for working class values has to feel the same way. That friction with corporate America has to be there. Somebody's offering.
Yeah, I mean, I think our members in general, they want to see, you know, good decisions made. They're going to keep and create, you know, great American jobs. And we've often talked about during the pandemic. I mean, we had bad trade deals,
right?
You know, dating back to 1993.
Yeah.
And when we hit the pandemic, you know, we were waiting for goods and services because we weren't producing or manufacturing in this country. So I don't think there's any dispute on that we need to bring manufacturing back. And I think, you know, everybody would embrace that, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. It's just, you know, a matter of executing it and making certain that it gets done.
I think it builds your credibility then when you say, hey, I don't like his tax cuts for the billionaires, right? I think they know then that you're not just saying it purely out of opposition. You hate everything he's doing. No, I can recognize that he's doing this thing for working class people. That's where my conviction orientation is. And I'm telling you this thing that he's doing is not for working class people. I think it builds your credibility when you can do it that way.
Yeah, and I think the other problem too, you know, and I don't know if this is a DNC problem or just a problem on both parties, is oftentimes, you know, like I'll give you a perfect example. During the election, you know, our biggest goal in labor is the PRO Act.
Yeah.
Right. We want to be able to organize new members. We want to be able to have access to the premise. We want a quick process to get through.
And there should be sanctions on companies when they union bust too.
Without a doubt. But the PRO Act was going to be introduced during the election as a political pawn, just to point the finger saying the Republicans are going to say no, instead of saying to Republicans, hey, look, we understand you're not satisfied with the bill as it's written. Let's get together, let's coordinate and find out what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
Shouldn't that be the role of both parties to not use a lot of legislation and or policy that's going to benefit working people as a political pawn?
Yes, and I think that you're pointing to the great role of the labor movement too, because I think that the labor movement, you know this better than most, you've lived it, is that you're the pressure on that system. Your votes are not taken for granted. You're not just, hey, I fall in line, then the party you gave me a bill. No. The politicians work for you. If you're doing your job right, and I say this of any advocacy group out there, you know, you got membership, you got people on your team, they need you. And your job, whether you're the Black Caucus, Latino Caucus, Labor Caucus, whatever it might be, your job is to set the standard and make politicians follow you, right? Be the change that you're trying to seek. And I think too often you find, you've seen this in your own life walks where, you know, people just fall in line and say, you're not pushing the political system anymore. You're just following the political system. Then you're not doing your job for the membership who's asking you to, can you get something done for me on the PRO Act? They don't want a charade. They want move the needle. And when you mobilize your base, I think, you know, too often we don't have enough of that.
When we talk about issues that are important to us, you know, we talk about the PRO Act, we talk about bankruptcy reform.
Right. And having the debate around working class issues. Like I would love to see just talking about an Amazon driver's life. Like, it doesn't even happen at the political level, right? Because it's understood to be a policy conversation, independent contractor rules, but it should be a political conversation. Like, do you know that, people wearing the vest and driving a car, with the logo don't actually have benefits from this company? Our independent contractors are jerked around and not given a decent wage and a decent opportunity to retire comfortably. Those are like real issues for real people. You could speak to tons of Amazon, you can
speak to every single worker.
Uber drivers all over this country are getting screwed every
You could
which way.
actually do something different that's never been done on both sides. Challenge these people. Come out to a work site, come out to a parking lot, talk to the people, go witness what they go through every single day. You'll get a better understanding, but more importantly, you get a better appreciation for what these folks go through, our members, day in and day out.
And if you do it right, you get your conviction orientation. You learn from the workers on the front lines. They'll tell you what are the algorithms that I'm getting screwed around as a driver. What are the, shifts that they're forcing me into? I don't feel like I have freedom to form a union here. I got this DPS delivery, services that I'm not given an opportunity to get the wages that I deserve of an Amazon employee. Instead, I'm working for a subcontractor. I'm misclassified on the job as a painter. Whatever the case might be, you'll see it, you'll feel it, you'll hear it from them, and it'll better set the agenda of this nation. That's what we should be fighting about. That's the things that we want to see both political system, the whole political system gravitate to. How are you going to fix this thing for tens of millions of people? Not like another tax cut for people dealing with the state or gift taxes. No, that's not the thing. That's not what we're after. How are you going to deal with tens of millions of workers at Walmart, Amazon, Dollar General? They're struggling. And I worry for them, their future lives, their kids. They ain't going to be able to retire, President O'Brien. You know that. They're working their asses off 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week and not getting themselves into any decency of respect and dignity.
Well, once you start behind the eight ball, you're never going to catch up. And I think a lot of people, especially working people nowadays, feel that they're starting behind the eight ball. And that's why organizations like ours, people that have your courage and conviction to take on these fights, to support these fights, but more importantly, highlight the struggles.
I was just going to say, because a lot of working people, this well, they know you don't have a magic wand and can't solve everything in a day. They're not dummies. They know that. Do you see me? Do you respect me? Do you know I exist? That's all they want. Do you know I exist? Let's set the bar there. Mm-hmm. Do you even know what I go through on a daily basis? And that to me is the biggest failure and letdown, because there are a lot of people who I'm confident. The worlds I travel in.
Sure.
I'm not sure that there's a lot of.
So how do you promote such outreach if you're going to be the head of the DNC?
That's not hard. That's the easy stuff, right? That's just
then
like
why aren't they doing it?
Because there's not a conviction orientation around this. You know that it's as simple as that. If the conviction orientation is there, you can do anything, right? You have a North Star. This is what I care about. You move a bureaucracy, you make it happen. But when you don't, then you find a reason. Actually, our job here is to win elections and help this Democrat winning in this ways, and this all we do is raise money. Sure, yes, but another way to think about winning that election and getting more money and getting more people is to be on the front lines of identifying and highlighting the causes of working people are struggling.
So what's the process to becoming the chairman of the DNC?
Now you get into it's a bit of a high school club.
Our audience wants to know.
President O'Brien, it's a high school club. So you got 450 people who got a vote. 2/3 of them, or some percentage.
And who are those 450 people?
So some people run for these jobs, right? So they come from all over the country. You run to be a Democratic National Committee member. Highlight maybe is that you get to go to the convention as a delegate.
So what is the election process like?
I think that there's 450 people who vote, and they come. It's a bit of a high school club. I got to be honest, and that. In that way, I say there's people who are councils and their caucuses. We got every council and caucus, by the way, if you ever want to see them. We got 18, 20 different caucuses. Everyone gets in and split yourself up by race, skin color, identity group. And then, I find that you don't really do much. So I'm frustrated about that. I'm like, you should have a program. I would assume
some people utilize the title and their status on a resume or on a, on what's that social media outlet? when they're looking for jobs. Or
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, right.
But I got to believe there are some hardworking people that take it serious.
Well, see what happens. You know, this is about bureaucracies. If you lower the bar and you say, I don't expect anything of you, guess what? Nothing's going to happen. If you raise the bar for these folks, I think a lot of people want to join the DNC and do something. Say, hey, somebody's got to tell them, here's some mission, here's some program. One thing we could do is work on candidate recruitment. Every freaking, race in this country should have a good, qualified, working class Democratic candidate running for that office. Let's work together. How do we get that to happen? What's the minimum funding levels we have to do to attract people to run?
And every state's different.
Every state's different. And say, hey, this is grassroots organizing. You and I were just talking about. Okay, tell me about economic justice fights in your state. Every time you come to DNC meeting, I want to hear what are some interesting and compelling things that are going on. If you do it that way, I think people will rise to the occasion. You would actually get stuff out of them. But you come to the meeting and you say, hey, your LGBT caucus there, your Asian American caucus there.
So you're already creating silos.
And you're telling them what you're preferencing. I'm going to preference you as being different from you and you. You and me, Sean, we don't even sit in the same room because I happen to have a different skin color.
Well, that's been our argument all along. Difference of opinions or difference of color, different of religion shouldn't matter in this process or in this game.
But how about you bring your background, your place, I bring my background, and we say we're going to do work on candidate recruitment together. And because you came from a place and I came from a place, I bet you will be better off because now you're bringing that identity, you're bringing that background experience to a program, to a job, to a mission, or grassroots organizing. You're gonna now you've given some purpose to it, not to divide us among each other.
So tell everybody, when is the vote?
Well, we're speaking right now on January 27th. It is 4 days from now, February 1st. I think it's on a Saturday morning around noon. So stay tuned. We'll see how that goes.
How is the voting process electronically?
It's paper, I believe.
Paper?
People write their names on a piece of paper.
So it's not going to be controversial. There'll be no impounded ballots or any of that stuff.
Listen, it's my first rodeo here, so I'll let you know on the back end of that. I don't know what to expect.
So your personal life, you're married to Sarah Miller.
Sarah Miller, who worked for Lena Khan as chief of staff.
All right, let's talk about Sarah Miller. Let's hear the story.
She's amazing.
Let's hear the story. How'd you meet?
Met at the political background. I mentioned John Podesta earlier. She was working for him as chief of staff at the Center for American Progress, and we hit it off. I said, she had to leave the job before I made my first outreach to her to say if you'd like to go out on a date, because I felt too squeamish about asking somebody who was a coworker on the same premises whether we should go out together. So I had to wait till she left, and then I asked her. And
you pounced right on that opportunity.
So day
like when she gave her notice and walked out at did her 2 weeks, walked out, you were waiting outside?
I was ready. I was like, hey, if you ever, as I think my first email to her was, hey, now that you've left, I wanted to see if you wanted to have a dinner just to celebrate, But
you knew what you were doing, right?
Oh yeah.
There was no hidden agenda. You just softly threw out a informal invite for a dinner.
Invite, yeah.
And
it worked out well.
It worked out well. Good. How long have you been married?
3 kids. We have 11 years now.
How old are the kids?
9, 7, and 3.
Boys, girls, what?
We have 2 girls, Sadia and Meyer, who are the elder, and then Amal, who's our youngest boy, 3 years old.
So they must be like another mother to him, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. How does your wife and your family embrace? Your wife's very active. She's, obviously anti corporate America, right? To a certain extent.
We share that. It's a shared passion.
That's great. And how is the family life affected by, 2 powerful, 2 influential people?
That's a big thing. We were at a pizza the other day in the neighborhood, and somebody said, seen me on TV, yelled out something like, hey, great job on TV, as they were getting their pizza. And I both me and my wife try to keep, we're parents, first off. That's it. We're parents, you don't need to, we tell them a little bit about what we do. We fight the bad guys, as we tell them, fight the bad guys, but that's all you need to know.
We call it like white collar crime syndicates.
Great. Love that.
Feel free to use it.
Tell Sarah that tonight.
Okay.
And so, my daughter, eldest daughter, she's onto the game a little bit. She's like, Dad, are you famous? I'm like, no, not famous at all. She's like, but like in DC, are you famous? I was like, no, I don't think so. And I said, no. And I was like, I still don't think though. but I don't want them any degree of head or humility, maintain a humility around it, and especially for the kids. You're like, I was joking with my Sarah, kids, people are always debating, what camps to send your kids to. I'm like, can we send them to like harsh labor camp, like where you have to shovel horse shit or something like that, does that exist for kids? Because I don't want people growing up feeling like, hey,
you have social services at your house after this podcast.
Well, now you know where I'm coming from. It's just like, hey, life is hard out there for people, and I don't want people to forget that, especially kids.
And listen, parents talk in front of their kids, and they're going to school with other kids, and God only knows what's said and or repeated. I can tell you a story. When I was a president of the Teamsters Local 25 in Boston, up until I was fortunate enough to get elected to this job, in the city where I lived, Teamsters Local represented the school nurses. So my oldest son is in like second grade, and everybody found out he's Sean O'Brien, same name as mine. And he come home from school, and I remember later that night talking about, hey, how was your day? And a note gets put in his backpack from the school nurse. And it says, tell your father to get us a good contract. I'm like, this poor kid has no idea.
But
there was no shame. There was no shame in making certain that, I had to make certain we got the best contract because my kid was going to school there.
How about that advocacy, though, by one of your Teamsters members?
Phenomenal. They wouldn't say it to me, they wouldn't say it to me, but they put it in a 5-year-old's backpack.
They knew how to get to your heart.
Awesome. You got to love it. You got to love it. Speaking about conviction orientation, can we talk about More Perfect Union?
So, President O'Brien, I started this 3.5 years ago. It's a media organization devoted to telling the stories of working class people. And that most of the time, a lot of these people, when you go on strike, it is an incredible act of economic courage. It is one of the things in society that I think we should just value and respect greatly, because people are putting their jobs on the line, they're putting their families on the line, putting communities on the line sometimes, because oftentimes, as you know, corporate America threaten to shut down the whole damn plant. And people take these incredible acts. And one of my greatest sadnesses was that too often most of the public doesn't even know what's happening. You may know it in the local community, but nationally, and I look at a lot of our wonderful friends in the union movement, I'm like, I see what we're talking about. I'm like, but do you even know that your local right now is doing this amazing act of courage? And they deserve to have a broad audience to know, because one of the levers of power and influence upon the corporation is their reputational damage, brand damage.
I think, to your point, people aren't getting the other side of that story.
Right.
And it's a one-sided narrative geared towards supporting corporations, not working people.
If you really, I would wake up every day, read the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and they tell you, how will this strike affect the stock price? Here we'll discuss. Like, is that the most important thing? And you'd have to hunt to figure out what are the causes that the workers are going on and strike over. To this day,
I think the media, outside of what you do, I think the media tries to control the narrative and put the consumer or whoever may be affected by bad behavior of an employee, 100%. where employers, where an employee is sticking up for their rights.
Definitely.
And their unions representing them, they get one narrative, and the media tries to do a great job of bastardizing
drawing
the
a
American
wedge,
worker.
right? Wedge.
Exactly.
Say, okay, well, if you're not an Amazon worker, but you're an Amazon consumer, so as an Amazon consumer, you should be very upset that these Amazon workers are going strike. They may delay your packages, God forbid. And you're like, oh, well, this is the major story we're consuming. But what is it that the Amazon workers want? I'm curious. Like, will anybody tell me? Mm-hmm. No, and it bothers the heck out of me to this day. And I tried to start an organization that just says, hear it from them, in their own voices. And you know this well. When you get on the ground, you talk to workers, don't give them talking points. They'll tell you with passion, with conviction, with honesty, with clarity, what is going on at a work site.
It's a true testimonial.
Yeah.
And there's no better true testimonial than from the rank and file members of the workers that are, being neglected and or mistreated.
Can I tell you one of the learnings of this is that now we're 3.5 years in, we got, pretty good popular.
How big's the staff at More Perfect?
30 people. 30
and what does the staff primarily do, or what is the day-to-day operation like at More Perfect Union?
Just a lot of talented video editors, video producers who are out on the ground fetching these stories, finding them, sending videographers on the ground, and then social media people. And it's a very simple
It's a vast
project.
distribution on social media.
Yeah, that was the learnings I would tell you, is that after 3.5 years of just telling worker stories, I was told at the beginning, right, when I come out of the Bernie campaign, we're told, oh, people, these aren't interesting stories. No one will even click on them. No one wants them. That's what you're told by the mainstream media, right? Or elites. And then you tell these stories. People love, they eat this up. They are hungry for it. They want to hear these stories. And so, it's a lie that, Wall Street Journal or CNBC has to present only the corporate side of the argument. People are hungry for the worker side of the argument. And there's clicks there. There's views there. There's an audience there.
Well, it's like during the Amazon strike. I think we did a great job, and I think you did a great job as well when we struck Amazon at the 22 locations the week before Christmas. The media tried to get out a narrative like this is going to put this consumer in a bad position. You're going to leave Christmas gifts. People aren't going to get gifts. And I think we did a great job of exposing Amazon and how bad they treated their workers.
What we're up against together, and you know this, for people who don't know and know what Sean O'Brien and others have to deal with, is Amazon is not only a powerful company. They hire PR professionals. They've got consultants up the wazoo. They've got connections into the media themselves. They could literally just call up the host on a lot of these shows or the leading Wall Street Journal reporter and just tell them. And that access, that kind of relationship often tilts the balance in favor of a lot of those stories towards the corporate perspective. And we have to fight uphill just to say, can you tell ours? Can you just give us a fair shake? And just getting a fair shake is not sometimes very hard to get. And I'm saying fair shake, how about you just tell it from the worker's perspective, just so you can hear that and understand that perspective.
And social media gives you the ability to put out a true, and in your words, credible narrative.
Again, you hear that from workers themselves. They're their best messengers. You don't give them talking points. In fact, this is what bothers me sometimes about the labor movement. You'll see these press conferences, and they put. We saw this during the Harris campaign too. You'll get these introducers of Kamala Harris who are like a local Teamster or something, and they've written it out for them, and you're like, oh my God, shoot me! Like the best thing about these people is throw that paper out. Let them just speak. Say, hey, you got a few minutes. Just say what you mean.
There's nothing worse than listening in any venue, someone that's scripted.
Oh, it's the word. And that sadly, that person would have such amazing things to say if you would let them just tell you what's going on. And now you're going to write from some 25-year-old is going to try to write some talking points that are focus group.
I felt the same way in my last CNN interview. There's so much I wanted to say and they just wouldn't allow me to do it. And that's the reason why mainstream media is a problem, especially for working people. Well,
now we're building different formats and we're testing the proposition, because I tend to believe, and you'll find out yourself with your podcast, is there's people, tens of millions of people out there who want this information. They're just being stopped from getting it.
Well, think about what we're doing right now. We're talking for over an hour and 20 minutes. We're not getting interrupted. We're not on a script. And we're talking about real issues that affect working people, that affect Democratic, Party, and any and all things that we want to talk about with no one interrupting us.
Right.
And people get to listen and form their own opinions. Yes. That doesn't happen in mainstream media, especially for working people.
That's right. Right. Their judgment, which is a very flawed and wrong assumption, is that people are not interested. It would be boring to them. These are not partisan. They love the horseshit stuff of like, Trump's going to buy Greenland or something, and they get all wrapped around.
Well, isn't Canada going to be the 51st state?
Whatever. Every day there's a new thing that they get all wrapped around, as you know, and then it deprives us.
Which we don't want to see that as a 51st state, by the way.
It deprives us of an honest conversation that actually speaks to people's desires and needs.
Obviously talking about mainstream media, do you think it's pretty much done?
Yeah.
In this country?
Yeah. I mean, it's lost all credibility with being anywhere near wanting to be resonant. You and I are talking about the politics problem of, we were saying Senator Sanders likes to be among the grassroots, to know what people are saying or feeling, and to be as close to that as possible. The same problem is in the media, right? When you sit up on high and you have no desire to get close to the struggles and the pains and the lives of tens of millions of people, what do you think is going to happen to you? You live in your own little ivory club, speak to your 500 people, see your audience dwindle, and of course you become irrelevant. You're only relevant to a group of people who live in a very elite
don't
space.
forget what the ulterior motive of Main Street media is. It's the bottom line of their balance sheet.
Right. They avoid the things that might affect that bottom line. So if we go to tell this pharma story, we might get a call from Merck or something, and they're not going to fund our ads on our station. So, okay, yeah, right. That's a sub. And then I've said this a long period of time of it may not be the case that some decent people on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or wherever don't want to tell you about working class issues, but they will be subconsciously affected. They know where their red lines are. If I say something about Amazon, right? They're going to know. They're like, if they're on air and you're saying, hey, I want to talk about Amazon, you can almost feel I don't know. Let's cut to commercial here.
Well, that happens in Senate hearings with supposedly some of our friends.
Yeah. You can feel the uncomfortability.
Oh, I can see it.
Yeah.
And because they're looking at campaign contributions, and if they take a position against,
it's not even it's campaign contributions, and it's like they know somebody who works there. They had a staffer who went there. Who
pops into my head when you're saying this? Chuck Schumer.
Uh-huh.
Do you know his daughter's a lobbyist for Amazon?
I didn't know that.
Well, you know now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Interesting.
But yeah, the things that's what I'm talking about. And oftentimes this is another nefarious thing that is affected. I'm invested in the company. My congressional, my stock portfolio has X% in Amazon. And I think that's not talked about enough about the effect that has when you're sitting there talking to people and saying, hey, this company, that company. And I bet some of their first minds are like, oh, shoot, I think I'm invested. And
I think I would challenge, trustees on pension funds, especially when they're investing in private equity, to take a look at who they're investing in.
Right.
Sometimes they might be investing in their own demise, our members' own demise. So we've been very vigilant and stuff like that.
It's not hard to get all members of Congress and anybody in public service, just get in the index funds, right? If you want to, that's fine. I'm not going to stop you from investing, but get in just a broad-based index fund in which you're rooting for America, rooting for the market. Fine. That's fine. But you can start stock picking as a day trader in Congress. I tend to find that among the things that you're talking about, campaign contributions affect you. Oh, you don't. If anyone out there wants to go and look at because now you have to file these, do the Stock Act, look at the members of Congress doing active trading.
And they weren't traders prior to being members of Congress?
It's hard. You don't have a disclosure. You only know the assets coming in.
I'm being sarcastic.
But now, the people get rich off of their information that they might know.
Yeah, it's just amazing to me. Some people come into Congress worth negative $5 and they leave worth $30 million. I last time I checked, the salaries weren't that lucrative.
No, it's an access to information, and it's this trading that bothers me because you're talking about fighting corporate America. Well, what happens when the people in service, public service, supposed to be fighting for people, are somehow also bigly invested?
Yeah, I think in the private world they call that insider trading. Right?
That's correct.
Punishable by federal prison.
Yes, we lock people up for that.
Interesting.
Shit. Yeah.
I think all along the criticism was that, the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, and then Harris Walz, they didn't talk about the actual struggles that people had. They were trying to dictate on what direction people should be voting on and not talking about, they were talking about their own accolades. We fixed your pension, right?
Right.
Okay, that's great. You fixed our pension. But that's one thing you did. You didn't show up on our picket lines.
Right.
You shut down Keystone Pipeline right away that put 7,000 Teamsters out of work. Let's talk about that stuff. So our narrative the whole time has been, look, that's great. Right. That's what you're elected and that's what you're paid to do, represent the constituencies that you're elected by.
Right.
To sit there and tell us all your accomplishments instead of actually being, human about what's wrong and what people are going through. Well, that's the problem.
In a period of higher inflation, people in middle class, working class families are dealing with higher costs. Right now, it is a fact that at the end of the Biden presidency, that a middle class ability to afford a lifestyle was most out of reach than it had been, years and years prior. That meant for a middle class person trying to afford college, trying to afford a house, trying to afford a car, trying to afford childcare, just the big staples in life were taking up more of the budget of a middle class person than they had for many, many years. So that's the reality. And you got to just know that. So as I say that, okay, how many people who are touting...
But how do they miss that? I mean, you've got so many talented people. You have economists, you have advisors. How do they miss that?
I don't know even if they miss it as much as they want to glide over it, and say, you know what, it's true, but we're doing all these other things. Don't you know, we got Medicare negotiating prescription drugs, and we've got these massive investments through Inflation Reduction Act and Build Back Better and stuff. And you're like, right, yes, but the middle class family, the life of a person is struggling, and so you got to speak to that. You got to say, you know, and Bernie Sanders would say to them, you know, when FDR was running, you know, for president after his first term, he says, I see a nation 1/3 ill-clad, ill-housed, right there. He sees it. I recognize. And my goal is not to tell you that, hey, everything is done great for you. No, it's to say that's why I need another 4 years. I am in a project right now to unrig this economy to make it work for you. And by acknowledging that that problem exists, tells them, hey, you might see it. You might know what I'm actually going through.
There was too much finger pointing though through this whole ordeal. You know, it's like whatever failures that the Democratic parties had over the last 4 years, it was blamed on somebody else, right? Which I think is not what people want to see and or hear. If, you know, we can take credit for all the great things that we do, we should also recognize and be transparent about the things we weren't able to accomplish. And I think that was a big problem with a lot of voters this time around this election. You know, we're gonna tell you all the great things we did for you, and we're gonna tell you how you should vote, but we're not gonna tell you about our shortfalls either.
But the shortfalls too is a sense of, are you done? Did you came, you saw, you conquered? You're glad, you're happy. That's it. That's all you got for me. The point of this is that you do have an agenda of wanting to stay in office and do anything more than you've done. When you start talking about all the great things we've done, it should only be in the case of giving you the legitimacy and credibility that in the next 4 years, I have big things that I want to tackle for middle-class people. And you should believe me more than the other person because I have some credibility of having done and fought for it. But when you don't say, what's your next agenda? What are you going to do next? And you only say, here's what I came, I saw, I conquered, I did all these great things, I earned your vote. You're like, well, then what cause or reason would people have to support you? And also, have you not identified any major problems that you want to address in the next 4 years?
What happened 5 years ago doesn't matter 5 years beyond.
And to come up with an idea of what you want to do next suggests that there's a problem you need to tackle. And so if you say, hey, there's childcare is very expensive, and here's something we want to do about it. Here, college education is very expensive, and here's some things I want to do about it. It's wild to me that line of thinking was not it wasn't a major focus of the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, we're a very intelligent society. A lot of intelligent people working.
People are not dumb.
On that campaign. I just still can't understand how they missed it.
I think that there's some people who are doing well in this economy. There are, you and I know. Like if you're a passive income earner, you know what I mean by that. If you mostly don't make your money driving in Amazon trucks, but you actually work, you know, maybe you work at a computer, but largely you're invested with hundreds of $1,000s or millions in the stock market. This was gangbusters for you. I mean, the market went up probably like 20% this last year. As a passive income earner, you are doing phenomenal. And that's that's a portion of the elites in society.
That's a short-term fix though for working people.
It's not a fix for any working people.
Right?
Like you may not have any passive income.
So if I have a 401k, right?
If I have
a 401k and I'm a working person,
yes,
and I'm looking at, you know, my income, my 401k, $300,000 it's worth. That's a lot of money to working people.
Totally.
Right. And they think it's because of, you know, who's in office. And yet one bad decision, one bad press conference, they could lose all their retirement.
Totally.
So it's not a permanent thing.
But you also know a lot of Amazon workers lost equity in the company. The company took it away from them. So a lot of them aren't even invested. So you don't have any passive income. But if you're one of the few who's, you know, it's not a small percentage, that you could wrongly start to think, right, President O'Brien, that the economy is not so bad. Why is everyone complaining?
Right.
Have you seen the growth? We had a gangbusters year. Everybody around me saying things are good. Right. Things are good. And if I look at the crop of people around Kamala Harris, I worried that a lot of those people, things were pretty damn good for you.
Oh, of course they were good for them.
It was good.
Look who her campaign manager was. Finance.
Oh, you talking about the Uber? Her brother-in-law,
Tony Jones,
Tony West,
Tony West,
yeah. Who is Uber's general counsel.
We've been fighting tooth and nail all over this country for years.
Yes.
Years upon years.
Yeah. Stock's doing great, though. Stock's doing great at Uber.
Yeah, it's
great. Making a lot of money.
Talk to the drivers. They're not doing so well.
And when you look on the other side, I mean, people will say, oh, well, what about Trump? And you're like, right. But he dons a McDonald's apron. He rides around in a garbage truck. I get it's performance art sometimes. But, he's saying, I am of people. That's what the message he's trying to send. Well, I'm not above you.
Well, to your point
I'm
earlier,
with you.
Biden walks on one picket line.
Yeah.
They highlight that like that's the best thing in the world. Yeah. Right? Everybody and their mother goes to McDonald's. Right. So, I mean, it's like, let's be a little bit smart about what audience you're trying to capture here.
Right. And just the performance art of it. He's doing a better job of it, quite frankly. If you're a working class party, man, you got to give me the strike lines, give me the walks on the pickets, give me like visits to Walmart and fight for Walmart workers, whatever the case may be.
So we can agree that both parties were scripted through some of the stuff.
Oh, I mean, and to be fair, in a presidential campaign, a lot of it is entertainment, right? You're trying to project some fun.
Yeah, I don't know what genre they would classify that in. Is it horror story or is it comedy or what? So my first guest in this podcast was Hasan Piker.
Oh yeah.
Who everybody know, especially the demographics of 18 to 35-year-olds.
Yes. We
had a long talk about Main Street media and just like we did how irrelevant that it has proven. What are the platforms like the Hasan Pikers of the world, and what influence are they going to have on elections moving forward?
There's been this discourse of the new Joe Rogan of the left. By the way, Joe Rogan supported Bernie Sanders back in 2020. So I got ripped for it, by the way.
Boston guy, by the way, Newton, Mass.
When we promoted Joe Rogan's support of Bernie, Human Rights Campaign, Move On, issued these statements condemning me and us for how dare you tout this person. I'm like, do you live in politics? The job is persuasion. You got to talk to people who don't always agree with you, and you welcome people being in your camp who may not necessarily be there. But putting that aside, these voices, this debate over Joe Rogan of the left, Hasan, all you're seeing is people who want to engage honestly in a platform and have real conversation. And so you look at the growth of people, and I'm glad that Hasan's doing well, and Joe, and a bunch of people are starting to Theo Vaughn, and there's a whole list of people. And it's not magic. It's just that they are wanting to have interesting, honest conversation that we're trying to have it right now. And we can't find that in other spaces, but the audience is there. People are hungry for it. Can you tell, especially if you have a little bit of opportunity to see it from the inside, and like you do, I've had a tiny bit as well. They want to say, tell us what it's like, but tell me honestly what the hell it's like. And I think the growth is going to be here. You're saying the media is going to die for sure. Old traditional media is going to die, but this is going to grow.
Well, not to use an analogy. I mean, you come from a family that, made a living off, cleaning other people's clothes, right? And used a lot of starch, and it was stiff, right? That's what Main Street media is to me. It's stiff.
Yes,
right. And when you have these forums like the Hasan Pikers, the Joe Rogans, the Theo Vaughns, the Tucker Carlsons, there's an openness, and a willingness, to be transparent and honest.
Yes,
you're not sitting there like you've been starched out.
Have a debate. I mean, there's a lot of places where I go now, and in left settings in particular, Sean, where I'm like, I got to say something like, hey, I'm going to say some things, but if you disagree with me, I would like you to say it. I would like to engage you.
You don't want them to post it after the fact?
or just like not say it and sit on be all nice about it and, sit on walking on eggshells and everyone's so polite to each other. I'm like, just if you disagree.
They're polite till they get home on that keyboard. And then
you learn about it the worst possible way, right? You're like, why don't you just say something?
They're courageous behind a keyboard.
Just say it.
There's nothing better than having, a healthy debate.
Yes.
Should never get personal.
I'm trying to set a marker for, do you give a shit about working class people? Are you going to do anything differently? I suspect that whoever is going to take over is going to want to have, and I don't think they have their own grand ideas of what they necessarily want to do to show working class support. And I'd like to say we're going to position ourselves in a place where, hey, you want some ideas? We'll give you some ideas. And I think coming out of this, my sense is they're going to want hey, how is there
So
anything I
in
could
the
do?
event you're not victorious, right?
Right. In the event I'm
In
not
the event
victorious.
you're not victorious,
Right.
what's the benefit you gain from the loss?
I think that one is having shaken the consciousness of this elite democratic world of maybe our failing brand with working class people needs some new ambition and power associated with building power for working people, that's a priority. That's the number one priority of rehabilitating this brand. That's one. And then two, getting tactical about it. So how are you going to use your organizing capacity? Are you going to be associated with striking workers, organizing workers in this country? I think hopefully challenge their consciousness that might be a better road if you give a damn about bringing people into this party. We'll see.
So a loss potentially could create a conscience for the winner.
This is how struggles of long political history work, right? Somebody somewhere has to throw in and say or see something that others are not willing to acknowledge and say, here's a direction. And that's how every grassroots movements, political movements start with somebody having to lose, right? You necessarily come from a place of being in a minority status or behind. When Bernie Sanders first ran for president, right? He's saying, I know I might not get many votes, but I am changing the way you might think such that over a period of time, you will see things differently. And I think he has. He has changed the nation just because of coming in and losing and forcing people to talk and think differently in this party. And I'd like to think there's a virtue. There's a virtue in losing and forcing and shaking people to think differently.
Well, there's no doubt whatever happens, that you will be a presence for a long time in the DC political arena.
Back at you. Same to you.
And it's good for working people and it's good for the country. So we appreciate you.
With your solidarity and support. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.